Hello again. This is not about exercise or science so much this time, or even a personal update in my life. I noticed something that was posted by a friend and it got me thinking. And so I just wanted to share a few thoughts about it. And that is this idea that or this attitude in social media where when you see something that's inspirational, or you see like a meme, or you see a picture with a little text on it that agrees with your ideology or agrees with some, presupposition that you've already, kind of taken in and decided to hold dear, you just pass it along, assuming that it's true. Now, we've talked about, quoting people or misquoting people and all of that, but I'm not even talking about that so much. It's about the actual nature of the claims themselves. Let me give a specific idea of what I'm talking about. I recently saw a post by a friend of mine that was sharing something that was supposedly said by this girl, Malala, who has been an advocate for women's rights in the Middle East and, has been a rather prominent figure, socially speaking, and is also a proponent of education, cutting defense spending, those sorts of things. And I'm not taking issue with any of that at all. I think that in many ways she stands for very good things, and we need people that are willing to fight for addressing inequalities and getting people more educated and trying to work towards positive social reforms. However, there's a picture that's been circulating for a while that quotes her, and I haven't looked in to see if it's misquoting her, but it quotes her as saying supposedly that if the world cut defense spending for 8 days, it could pay for children's education for 12 years. So just for reference, this is the picture that I'm talking about here. Now, it should intuitively be nonsensical, right? It should make no sense at all. It's a completely ridiculous claim to, I think, anybody who has a reasonable understanding of math and that there's a limited number or amount of resources in the world. Yet, this thing is getting circulated like wildfire. In fact, I clicked on the original source for the link or for the picture that my friend shared, and on that site, it had been shared more than 10,500 times and had a ton of likes, and everybody that was commenting on it was agreeing with it. It didn't seem as though anybody had taken the time to actually investigate whether or not the numbers added up. So I did. And I can actually pull it up right here as far as some of the things that I looked at. Again, it's saying, if world leaders cut 8 days of military spending and we give all children access to 12 years of free education. Now, I'm not saying that this is exactly what Malala herself said. I'm just saying that this is what the image says. It's quoting her as saying that, and so trying to borrow her authority to say that, oh, well, this is true. It's not true at all. Without going into all the detail, and this took me maybe about 15 minutes to just do some quick internet searches, find some census data. If you just localize it to the U.S., just the U.S., which spends way more on defense than other countries per capita, and also does not have the child population that some countries have. In many developing nations, for instance, birth rates are way higher and child populations are way higher. Death rates are skyrocketing or way up there as well. But the point is that as a percentage of our population, we don't have as many children as some of these other countries do, yet we spend way more on defense. So if any country can pull this feat off of paying for all of its children's education for 12 years by cutting 8 days of military spending, it should be the U.S. But then the numbers just don't add up. We have about 74 million kids, but if you round that down to 70 million kids, at a cost of minimum about $6,000 a year in spending, the average in the country is really about $10,000 plus in terms of the amount that it costs us to put a kid through school for a year. But if you round that down, or if you bring that down to the lowest cost, I think it's Utah, that only does it for $6,000 a year or something like that, then you're still looking at an insane amount of money. $6,000 a year for 12 years, so that adds up to $72,000 per child, times, let's round down to 70 million children. I said it was 74, but round down to 70 million. You come up with a 12-year education budget of over $5 trillion just for the children in the U.S. $5 trillion. The trouble is, the U.S. defense budget is somewhere in the neighborhood of $600 billion for a year. If you cut that down to what it would be in 8 days, that's something like a 45th of that. So if you divide that number by 45, you get something in the neighborhood of about $13.3 billion. $13.3 billion. $5 trillion. Again, I'm doing this very conservatively. I'm actually, or rather, I'm doing this optimistically. I'm trying to make these numbers round in the direction that would lead it towards possibly being able to cover education with the cuts in defense spending. And even so, we are still looking at a shortfall that's insane. The magnitude is about 350 times. That is to say that we would need about 350 times the budget we currently have to be able to cut defense spending for 8 days and pay for 12 years of school just for U.S. children. And again, that's in a country that spends way more on defense. I'm going to include below this video just the quick numbers that I did so you can follow along. But the point of all this is that you see these claims being made all the time, just flying back and forth all over the internet, on social media, and people maybe have their hearts in the right place. They are trying to do something positive, to encourage social change and to be part of a movement, but really it for the most part amounts to slacktivism. It's just gross inattention to detail and a complete lack of critical thinking, a lack of doing one's homework or checking sources, checking claims before passing things along. And this is not helping anything. In fact, it's contributing to ignorance. It's contributing to the problem by spreading more disinformation and spreading confusion about all of these different things. And education is a big deal. Defense spending is a big deal. But we've got to get the numbers right before we talk about these things. So I wanted to share that for a bit. Again, this is based not on anything specifically that Malala said. I'm not trying to tear her down. What I'm doing is trying to say that we cannot look at a meme or look at a picture that gets circulated with a little bit of text on it and say, oh, that must be true. Or, oh, those numbers must fit because they're inspiring to us or because it feels good to believe what the picture is saying. So if you've ever seen this particular thing circulating around, this image of Malala's face and then saying that 8 days of defense spending cuts or 8 days of military cuts could pay for 12 years of education for all children, it's complete and utter nonsense. It's not to say we don't need to change the way we fund things, but let's not be sloppy. So that's what I wanted to say. Again, I'm going to include some of the numbers that I ran in the description or below the video, and you can check it yourself. And again, it was really quick. You could obviously tighten up the numbers a lot, but it was just to get a general, very vague idea of what this spending would kind of look like. So hopefully somebody gets something out of this video. It was just really bothering me, and I realized that people don't take the time to check into the claims that are being made. So there you have it. Hopefully that makes some sense. Feel free to comment, make suggestions, give any feedback, give any other thoughts or experiences you've had. But this is a problem. Social media is great when it's used right, and it's awful when it contributes to ignorance, which is really what is happening here.